Maple Green Estates was the kind of suburban community that starred in real estate brochures. Perfectly trimmed lawns, neat rows of pastel-colored houses, and streets lined with youthful maple trees welcomed residents who valued order and tranquility. While the outward appearance of Maple Green Estates promised harmony, hidden underneath was a tension often found in such carefully controlled settings. Rules were rules, and to many, they represented a comforting structure. But to others, especially those with unique needs or perspectives, these rules could become a minefield of conflict. It was in this setting that Patricia Nolan, a quiet, resolute woman in her late 30s, had chosen to build her life. Patricia had been blind since a childhood illness, and after her mother passed away, she inherited enough money to buy a modest ranch home in Maple Green. She fell in love with its clean sidewalks, the well-lit streets, and the sense of small-town camaraderie. Most importantly, she believed it to be a place she could navigate safely and independently. From the outset, Patricia spent time learning the neighborhood's layout with the help of an orientation and mobility specialist. She memorized street names, curb cuts, and driveway slopes, forging a mental map that extended from her front door to the grocery store a few blocks over. Over several months, she perfected her route, aided by her cane and the subtle landmarks that guided her. A certain creaking oak tree near the intersection, the texture changed from grass to sidewalk in front of the community clubhouse. These were quiet cues that helped her move freely, with confidence. Little did she know, however, that one particular resident wielded the HOA rulebook like a weapon, obsessed with preserving the look of perfection. This was Evelyn Karen Pennyman, a woman with a stiff posture, meticulously styled hair, and a perpetual air of disapproval. As Maple Green's HOA vice president and compliance chair, she believed her vision of uniformity trumped all else, including concerns for accessibility. Patricia had yet to meet her, but their worlds would collide in a way that would change Maple Green Estates forever. Evelyn Pennyman, whom neighbors called Karen behind her back, saw herself as a champion of the Maple Green standard. She took daily walks around the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, cataloging every perceived misstep. A mailbox 1 inch too tall, a newly planted tree that wasn't on the approved species list, a child's chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Nothing escaped her watchful gaze. Karen's dedication to uniform aesthetics verged on obsession. She had once found a family because their holiday wreath extended slightly beyond the front door frame, and her stern letter alleged a violation of facade guidelines. Most residents begrudgingly complied, fearing the headache and expense of fighting the HOA. Karen's influence over Maple Green was near total, her biggest ally being the fact that few wanted the trouble of resisting her. As for Patricia Nolan, she initially flew under Karen's radar. Patricia's lawn was neat, her home's paint color conformed to the HOA palette, and she never left trash bins out past collection day. But Karen did notice something. Patricia seemed to have placed small, round tactile markers, dome-shaped bumps or studs, along the edges of her driveway and walkway. When Karen first saw them, she frowned in confusion. They looked like neat little bumps of plastic or metal dotting the concrete at intervals. She had no idea what they were for, but to her they looked odd, out of place. It never occurred to Karen that these might be an important accessibility measure for a blind resident. Weeks passed before Karen mustered the nerve to investigate. One afternoon, she marched up Patricia's walkway, only to spot the small sign near the doorbell indicating, "Doorbell camera installed. I am visually impaired. Please state your name." Karen pressed the bell. The voice that answered through the speaker was calm but curious. "Hello, who is it?" Karen stated her name, voice brimming with self-importance. "This is Evelyn Pennyman, Vice President of Maple Green Estates, HOA Compliance. May I speak with the homeowner, please?" Patricia, inside, felt a flicker of apprehension. "Yes, hello, Miss Pennyman. I'm Patricia Nolan. Is there something I can help you with?" Karen cleared her throat. "I would like to discuss the additions you appear to have made to your driveway and walkway. Are those, by any chance, modifications you installed without HOA approval?" Patricia's polite voice replied, "Do you mean the tactile markers near the edges?" "Yes, I placed them with help from my contractor. They're small, flush dots that help me identify where the concrete edges drop off. Since I'm blind, they're crucial for safe navigation." Karen listened, face neutral, but with eyes narrowing in displeasure. She said stiffly, "I wasn't aware of any submitted request for walkway modifications. It may be considered a violation, given these items alter the external appearance of your property." She pulled out her phone to snap photos. "We'll need to evaluate this for compliance. I'll be in touch." Before Patricia could explain further, Karen pivoted sharply and marched off. Patricia stood on the other side of the door, heart sinking, suspecting an uphill battle ahead. She had believed these small, safety-oriented markers fell under reasonable accommodations that did not require special permission. But she quickly learned that in Karen's maple green, every detail, however minute, underwent scrutiny. 3 days later, Patricia found an envelope taped to her front door. The HOA letterhead glared at her with bold, official language, "Notice of violation." Inside, the letter cited unapproved external modifications to the front driveway/walkway area, referencing the Maple Green Estate's covenant sections that required advance permission for any visible structural or aesthetic additions. Confused, Patricia phoned the HOA office. A receptionist told her to direct concerns to Ms. Pennyman, who handled compliance issues. Patricia left a voicemail politely explaining the nature of the tactile markers. "They help guide my cane so I don't step off the edge or trip." She explained that, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, certain modifications for accessibility should be accommodated. But days passed with no return call. Finally, an email from Karen arrived. Its tone was curt. "Ms. Nolan, your request for exceptions must be made in writing and reviewed by the full HOA board. In the meantime, we consider the existing tactile bumps unapproved modifications. If no official approval is granted, we will assess a fine and require removal." Patricia felt her stomach tighten. This was more than just a hassle. It was her safety on the line. Those tactile markers helped her navigate around the edges of her property. Still, she complied with the procedure. She submitted an exception request to the board, including medical documentation of her visual impairment and a letter from her mobility specialist explaining the significance of tactile cues. The monthly HOA meeting took place in Maple Green's small community clubhouse. Patricia arrived early, accompanied by her friend and co-worker, Monica, who drove her there. The room featured folding chairs arranged before a long table where the HOA board sat, including the president, treasurer, secretary, and of course, Vice President Evelyn Pennyman, aka Karen. Patricia and Monica took seats in the front row. Neighbors milled about, some chatting softly. Patricia's hands trembled around her cane. She wasn't typically one for public speaking, but she had no choice if she wanted to keep her accessibility markers. When a meeting came to the new business segment, Karen introduced Patricia's case with a clipped tone. "We have an appeal here from Ms. Nolan regarding unapproved modifications, specifically small dome-shaped bumps along her driveway. The board must determine if these are permissible." Patricia rose, with Monica guiding her gently to the microphone. Clearing her throat, Patricia spoke. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Nolan. I installed those tactile markers because I'm blind. Without them, it's easy to misjudge the edge and stumble, especially near the driveway drop-off. They're small, discreet, and flush with the surface, so they don't pose a tripping hazard to others. I believe the Fair Housing Act and the ADA protect my right to reasonable accommodations in housing. I'm asking for your approval to keep them in place, as they're vital for my independence." She paused, hearing a murmur among the crowd. Some people, unfamiliar with Patricia's story, seemed sympathetic. Others appeared uncertain, wary of siding against the formidable Ms. Pennyman. Karen's voice sliced through the hush. "We appreciate your perspective, Ms. Nolan," she said flatly, "but Maple Green rules are clear. All exterior modifications, regardless of purpose, must be pre-approved to ensure consistent appearance. We want to avoid random additions that might detract from the overall aesthetic. Patricia's cheeks burned. But these bumps help me live safely, she repeated. Surely that must take priority over aesthetics. Before Karen could retort, an older gentleman named Jerry Lau, one of the board members, spoke kindly. I don't see an issue with small tactile dots. I'm not sure how they detract from our neighborhood. Perhaps we can consider granting Ms. Nolan a straightforward exemption. Karen bristled. The question isn't whether one small change is visually offensive. The question is how many unapproved changes we'll end up with if we start making exceptions. Where do we draw the line? The HOA president, Belinda Caro, stepped in. Let's table the vote briefly. We'll do a site visit. If these markers are minimal and can be shown to be truly necessary for Ms. Nolan's safety, I don't see an obstacle to approving them. Let's meet next Tuesday at Ms. Nolan's address for PM. Does that work? Patricia let out a breath of relief. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Karen folded her arms, a tight-lipped expression. The gathering moved on to other matters, but Patricia left that evening with cautious hope. She sensed that not everyone shared Karen's hostility, though Karen's power on the board was considerable. Patricia resolved to demonstrate how essential those tactile markers were, praying reason would prevail. The following Tuesday, Patricia awaited the HOA board members in her driveway. She had arranged her day off from work to ensure she could meet them. Monica stood by, ready to offer moral support if needed. A black SUV pulled up, and out stepped Belinda Caro, Jerry Lau, and Karen. The latter wore a pinched expression, as if she were already annoyed just by being there. They approached the driveway, their shoes clicking on the concrete. Patricia guided her cane carefully, orienting toward the group. Hello, Patricia said softly. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Belinda offered a courteous smile. Thank you for accommodating us. Let's see these markers, shall we? Patricia took a moment to demonstrate how she used her cane to detect the raised bumps. See, they're set back just a few inches from the edge. Once my cane feels them, I know to adjust so I don't walk off onto the grass or miss the curb. It's especially important at night or if a neighbor's car is parked close, limiting my space. Jerry crouched, running a hand over one of the markers. They're quite small. I can't see how they'd cause any hazard. He stood, looking to Karen. What do you think, Miss Pennyman? Karen pursed her lips. They're not a hazard, but they're also not in the original design. Maple Green invests heavily in uniform aesthetics. Walkways and driveways should match the approved pattern. If we start allowing lumps or bumps on someone's property, who's to say the next person won't add unsightly reflectors or swirling patterns of paint? She turned to Belinda. We must consider the precedent. Patricia's heart pounded. These are not about decoration, she insisted, voice trembling. They're a safety measure. I hope you'll see that. Belinda nodded thoughtfully. This doesn't appear disruptive, but Ms. Pennyman is correct about consistent policy. The board can, however, grant accommodations for medical or disability-related needs. Karen's face remained unreadable, but Patricia sensed her tension. As they concluded the visit, Belinda promised a decision at the next board meeting. Patricia thanked them for their time, though she felt uneasy. Karen had voiced no support for her cause, and Patricia wondered if that spelled trouble. The board met a week later. Though Patricia didn't attend in person, she was traveling for a doctor's appointment. She got a phone call from Belinda afterward. With a smile in her voice, Belinda informed her that the board voted 5-1 in favor of approving Patricia's tactile markers under a reasonable accommodation clause. The only dissenting vote came from Karen. Patricia exhaled in relief. Thank you so much, she said, tears pricking her eyes. I really appreciate everyone's understanding. Belinda assured her, we see no reason to remove something that helps you get around safely. I've also asked the landscaping committee to keep the sidewalk edges clear, just to ensure your path stays unobstructed. Hanging up, Patricia felt a wave of gratitude. She emailed the contractor who had installed the markers, letting him know everything was officially approved. Monica and a few neighbors offered their congratulations, everyone except Karen, who remained silent. Indeed, Karen felt seething resentment that the board had undermined her. In her mind, Maple Green's pristine uniformity was compromised by these lumps in the concrete, no matter how small. That Patricia's safety might be at stake didn't register as strongly with Karen as the idea that she'd lost a battle to keep the community visually perfect. She stewed on it privately, her dissatisfaction growing. For a time, though, Patricia enjoyed a sense of security. She resumed her daily walks with her cane, trusting that no one would demand she remove her tactile aids. She had no inkling that Karen's opposition ran deep, and that the real trouble was yet to come. One evening, well after midnight, the streets of Maple Green Estates lay mostly silent, lit only by faint lampposts. A light autumn wind rustled the maple leaves. In that hush, a solitary figure crept along the sidewalk toward Patricia Nolan's home. The figure wore a hooded jacket and carried a small duffel bag of tools. Under the cover of darkness, the figure approached Patricia's driveway. The house was dark. Patricia was asleep inside, unaware of any intrusion. With swift, furtive motions, the hooded person pulled out a heavy chisel and hammer. Then, in a meticulously destructive process, the figure began chipping away at the small, dome-shaped tactile markers embedded in the concrete. Clink, clink. Each blow of the hammer dislodged pieces of the plastic or metal domes. The figure worked methodically, scanning for movement in neighboring windows. If a car passed, the person paused, crouching low behind a shrub. But no one seemed to notice. It was well after 1 a.m. The quiet suburb offered the perfect cover. By the time the intruder finished, every single tactile bump on Patricia's driveway and walkway had been gouged out or hammered flat, leaving chipped concrete and ugly divots in their place. Tiny shards of plastic littered the ground. Satisfied, the figure packed up, slipped away into the night, and disappeared. In the dark serenity of Maple Green, no one heard the sabotage. No motion-activated cameras had a clear angle on the driveway. For all appearances, the vandal had come and gone without a trace. Patricia's carefully installed markers, vetted and approved by the HOA, were now wrecked beyond repair. At dawn, Patricia stepped outside with her cane, planning a morning walk. She expected to feel her familiar tactile bumps near the edge of the driveway, but her cane slid awkwardly across a chipped surface. Confused, she swept the cane more carefully, only to realize something was terribly wrong. The texture was gone. Instead, there were jagged holes and rough patches that caught her cane's tip. Alarmed, Patricia knelt to touch the pavement with her hand, wincing as she encountered sharp edges. Panic flared in her chest. Who could have done this, and why? The once smooth, accessible surface was destroyed. Fearful she might cut herself, she retreated inside and phoned Monica, voice trembling. When Monica arrived, she surveyed the vandalism in horror. Patricia, this was deliberate. Every single marker is chipped out. Tears of frustration stung Patricia's eyes. Why would anyone do that? They're just little bumps. Now I can't safely navigate without risking a fall. Monica helped Patricia call the police to file a report. An officer arrived, took pictures, and asked if Patricia had any known disputes with neighbors. Patricia sighed, describing the friction with the HOA, though she never imagined someone would go to these lengths. The officer noted no cameras pointed directly at that spot, and with no leads, the case would be difficult to solve. Word spread fast among nearby residents. Most were appalled that someone would sabotage a blind woman's safety measures. Patricia found herself fielding concerned phone calls and texts from people she barely knew, offering sympathy. In all the flurry of attention, one notable silence stood out. Karen had not reached out at all, nor commented publicly about the incident. Within days, the story of the vandalism made the local news. A short article on the neighborhood's online bulletin circulated, accompanied by photos of the smash markers. The piece highlighted Patricia's blind status and how these tactile bumps were essential for her independence. It ended with a question. Who could be so callous as to destroy important accessibility features? Residents reacted strongly. Some suggested a community fundraiser to replace the markers. Others wrote supportive comments under the post, condemning the vandalism as heartless. Even people who had once fretted about the rules agreed that targeting a blind neighbor's accommodations was beyond comprehension. Patricia, meanwhile, weighed her options. She could install new markers, but what if someone destroyed them again? She worried about living under constant threat. Her mobility had been severely impacted, forcing her to rely on Monica or her friend from work for errands she once did alone. The sense of independence she had cherished was shattered as thoroughly as the tactile bumps. At a special emergency HOA meeting called to address the incident, concerned neighbors spoke out. Many advocated for stronger security measures, more cameras, better street lighting, a volunteer patrol. Jerry Lau expressed outrage. "We approve these markers. This is an attack on our sense of community." Karen was present, quietly listening with folded arms and an expression of distant concern. Eventually, when it was her turn to speak, she condemned the vandalism in vague terms. It's regrettable that someone resorted to such destructive behavior. Yet she offered no specific plan to restore the markers or help Patricia. Her cold formality rubbed some the wrong way, but no one had definitive proof linking her to the sabotage. Amid the uproar, a group of younger residents, led by a tech-savvy couple named Dylan and Sarah Ross, rallied around Patricia. They met her only briefly at neighborhood barbecues, but they felt strongly that Maple Green needed to protect her right to live safely. Sarah posted on the community's social media page, encouraging folks to donate to a tactile replacement fund. Dylan researched advanced solutions that went beyond simple adhesive bumps. "I found a company that makes custom Braille pavers, concrete tiles with raised lettering and tactile strips built in," Dylan explained to Patricia one afternoon. "They're permanent. They can be integrated into sidewalks, driveways, crosswalk ramps. If we get enough funding, we could install them not just on your property, but at key intersections around the neighborhood." Patricia was stunned by their generosity. "That's incredible," she whispered, hardly daring to hope. "But that must be expensive. I wouldn't want anyone to go broke over this." Sarah smiled. "That's what crowdfunding is for. Once people realize how important this is, I'm sure they'll pitch in. Not just for you, but for any visually impaired visitors or neighbors in the future." Within days, the campaign took off. Neighbors contributed whatever they could. Even people outside Maple Green pitched in after seeing the local news story. Volunteers emerged, offering to help with labor, contacting city officials about any matching grants. While the HOA as an entity remained cautious, Jerry Lau and Belinda Caro expressed support. "It's a wonderful idea," Belinda said in an email. "The board will review a formal proposal for community accessibility improvements." Karen, however, remained notably silent about the fundraiser. She politely avoided the topic in board discussions, but behind closed doors, she seethed. The idea of Braille pavers scattered around Maple Green felt like an affront to her cherished uniform sidewalks. She had lost once on the matter of Patricia's driveway. Now it seemed the entire neighborhood was ready to embrace what Karen deemed ugly lumps in the concrete. But with so many eager supporters, Karen realized she couldn't simply override them without appearing monstrously cruel. Amid the hopeful progress of the fundraiser, Patricia still faced daily challenges. She dreaded stepping outside alone, especially after dark. That sense of freedom she once felt was replaced by anxiety. Monica, Dylan, or Sarah often accompanied her for walks, but Patricia worried she was burdening them. Then, one late afternoon, Patricia ventured out alone to grab mail from the community mailbox kiosk just a block away. She thought she could manage that short distance, relying on memory of where the curbs ended. About halfway there, she lost track of the boundary between sidewalk and the adjacent drainage slope. Her cane didn't catch the missing texture where a marker had once provided a clue. She stumbled down a slight incline, scraping her knee on the rough pavement. Though it wasn't a severe injury, it rattled her deeply. A passing neighbor helped Patricia to her feet, alarmed by her skinned knee and the tears of frustration in her eyes. "This is exactly why I needed those markers," Patricia said shakily. "I'm trying so hard to be independent, but someone took that away from me." Word of her fall quickly spread among her neighbors, fueling more support for the Braille Pavers project. People saw firsthand the real consequences of removing or sabotaging accessibility features. The incident galvanized the fundraiser even further, with donations pouring in. Meanwhile, the identity of the vandal remained unknown, though quiet speculation targeted either an outside trespasser or an exceptionally heartless Maple Green resident. Patricia tried not to dwell on who it might be. She just wanted to move forward. While the community's goodwill soared, Karen found herself isolated. Meetings turned frosty for her. Although no one openly accused her of the vandalism, some residents eyed her with thinly veiled suspicion. How many times had she griped about the ugly lumps? She had been the only dissenting vote in the board's approval of Patricia's markers, and she'd been known to take extreme measures for the sake of neighborhood beauty. At home, Karen fumed. She had built her entire self-image on being Maple Green's guardian of uniformity and elevated aesthetics. And now, not only had the board disregarded her stance, but the community was doubling down by installing even more tactile features, some of them larger and more noticeable than the discrete bumps had been. The Braille pavers were set to become permanent fixtures at crosswalks, corners, and driveways. In Karen's mind, this spelled doom for the pristine look she cherished. Late one night, she paced her pristine living room. "They can't do this," she muttered, reading the latest updates from Dylan and Sarah's social media page about the fundraiser's progress. 100 donors in 2 days. Enough to install pavers in at least 4 major spots. Her heart pounded in rage, but she also felt trapped. If she openly opposed the pavers, she'd appear cruel and ableist, especially after Patricia's fall. And if she tried more clandestine sabotage, she risked being caught. The memory of chiseling out the bumps pricked her conscience, but that pang of guilt was overshadowed by anger. Karen faced a choice: double down or let the neighborhood slip away from her control. She vowed not to surrender so easily. Within weeks, Dylan and Sarah's fundraiser far surpassed its initial goal. The paver manufacturer offered a discount for bulk orders, and a local construction crew volunteered to help install them. It was the perfect confluence of resources. The next step: present a formal proposal to the HOA to integrate Braille pavers in key locations: public sidewalks, the perimeter around the clubhouse, and major intersection crosswalks. Additionally, Patricia's driveway would receive newly installed, tamper-resistant pavers that rose slightly, forming both a tactile and color-contrasting surface. On a crisp Saturday morning, Dylan, Sarah, and Jerry Lau met at the clubhouse to finalize the details for the next HOA board meeting. Patricia, still shaken from a recent mishap, joined them for moral support, though she let Dylan and Sarah take the lead. They hammered out a plan, mapping each location where Braille pavers would do the most good. The cost calculations showed the fundraiser could cover everything. The city's ADA guidelines even offered partial reimbursement for crosswalk improvements. "This is a no-brainer," Jerry said, tapping the table. "The money's raised, the community wants it, and will be more accessible to everyone. It's just a question of the board's formal green light." Patricia felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you all," she said softly. "I never imagined so many people would care. It's overwhelming in a good way." Sarah reached out and squeezed Patricia's hand. "We're just doing what's right." Karen, notably absent from the planning session, would be the biggest obstacle. Nonetheless, the group prepared for the upcoming board meeting with determination. It seemed the entire neighborhood was rallying to make Maple Green not just uniform, but inclusive. The night of the board vote arrived. The community clubhouse buzzed with residents excited about the Braille paver plan. Patricia, Monica, Dylan, Sarah, Jerry, and Belinda all wore bright smiles as they greeted one another. A hush fell once the meeting was called to order. After some routine business, the Braille paver proposal took center stage. Dylan delivered a concise presentation, projecting slides that showed sample Braille pavers, cost breakdowns, and the benefits to Maple Green. Sarah explained how they'd coordinate with the construction crew for minimal disruption. Then Jerry spoke, praising the plan as a win-win for neighborliness and safety. When the floor opened for discussion, several residents offered supportive comments. A mother whose son was visually impaired spoke passionately about how this would help him visit friends around the neighborhood. A retired Army veteran recounted how accessible sidewalk features had helped a friend regain independence after losing part of his vision. Finally, Karen stood to address the room. The air shifted. People knew she was the likely dissenting voice. She spoke in a measured tone, trying to appear rational. While I understand the desire to assist Ms. Nolan, we must question whether Braille pavers at every intersection are truly necessary. The cost is significant, even with a fundraiser, and the aesthetic change is substantial. We are known for our uniform sidewalks. Installing lumps and ridges could detract from our carefully maintained appearance. And there's the matter of upkeep. Pavers can crack, leading to further expenses. A tense murmur ran through the crowd. Dylan responded calmly, pointing out the volunteer labor and discount, the city's partial reimbursement, and the minimal ongoing cost. Sarah added that the pavers were durable and covered by a warranty. Karen pressed on, "I'm just concerned about setting a precedent for cluttering our sidewalks." Patricia's situation might be addressed by reinstalling smaller bumps, but do we need to plaster every crosswalk with Braille? Does it not degrade property values to have these lumps everywhere? Belinda, the HOA president, raised a hand, silencing the room. "Ms. Pennyman, we appreciate your perspective, but we've heard a large outpouring of support from the community. The funds are donated specifically for this project. Unless there's a direct conflict with Maple Green's covenants, which I don't see, given this is an ADA-compliant improvement, I recommend we approve it." Jerry motioned for a vote. The board members cast their ballots quickly. Karen's was the sole no, while the others voted yes. Applause and cheers erupted. Patricia breathed a sigh of relief, tears in her eyes. She couldn't believe it. Maple Green was about to become more accessible than ever. Karen stood off to the side, arms folded, watching the jubilant crowd. She offered a tight, disingenuous smile. Beneath it lurked a simmering bitterness. She had lost again, and Maple Green sidewalks would soon bear the very lumps and ridges she despised. But she wasn't quite done fighting. Within a month, the Braille pavers arrived. Pallets of specialized concrete tiles, each with raised bumps or ridges and some with Braille lettering for street names or directions, were delivered to a staging area near the clubhouse. Volunteers, including local teenagers earning community service hours, pitched in to help unload them. The construction crew carefully planned each location: corners, crosswalks, the walkway around the clubhouse, and of course, Patricia's driveway. At first glance, the pavers looked gray and unassuming, just like normal concrete. But running a hand over them revealed the carefully crafted texture. Some had truncated domes, like standard tactile paving used for curb ramps, while others contained Braille instructions such as stop, main saint, or slow curb. The designs followed ADA guidelines, ensuring both blind and low-vision pedestrians could interpret them. Patricia, invited to check out a sample, felt the bumps under her fingertips, a thrill coursing through her. "I can't believe we're going to have these all over Maple Green," she said. "I never imagined that something good could come from that terrible vandalism." Dylan grinned. "Once we're done, Maple Green might be a model for other neighborhoods to become more accessible." Karen, though present in name only, watched from her home with pursed lips as the installation schedule was published. She saw neighbors gather, excited about the upcoming changes. She saw photos posted online of the new pavers. Furious, she tried voicing small objections, claiming the exact shade of gray clashed with Maple Green's palette, but no one listened. The board had approved the plan, the funds were private donations, and the city was on board. There was no feasible route for Karen to stop the project without revealing her pettiness. Construction began with a flurry of activity. Crews worked section by section, removing strips of existing sidewalk, then laying the Braille pavers with care. Residents marveled at the organized process. First, the old concrete was saw-cut and lifted away. Next, the ground was leveled, drainage considered, and the pavers set. Finally, fresh concrete edges sealed them in place. The result was a neat row or pattern of textured tiles at each intersection or crossing. Patricia's driveway, the project's emotional centerpiece, was scheduled for a special day. Volunteers from a fundraiser insisted on helping personally. Monica, Dylan, Sarah, Jerry, and even Belinda arrived with hats and gloves, assisting the professional crew. For Patricia, Watching the old chipped driveway surface be removed was cathartic. The contractor then installed rectangular pavers spanning the driveway's edges, each one textured enough to be felt by a cane and footstep. They also added a subtle color contrast, darker gray against the lighter main driveway, helpful for neighbors with low vision. Though the job took most of the day, by late afternoon the site was transformed. Patricia carefully approached with her cane, guided by Dylan. She placed the tip on a newly installed row of Braille pavers and felt the uniform bumps. A tearful smile spread across her face. "This is amazing," she whispered. "I'll never forget your kindness." Her neighbors cheered as she took a few hesitant steps along the driveway's edge. The tactile feedback was immediate. She could sense precisely where to stay. Gone were the chiseled holes, replaced by a robust, tamper-resistant solution. If anyone tried to sabotage this again, they'd have to rip out a fully integrated slab of concrete. It felt secure, permanent, an anchor of confidence. For Karen, witnessing the paver installation felt like a punch to the gut. Everywhere she went, lumps, ridges, and Braille lettering cropped up, on corners, on ramps, near the clubhouse entrance. Maple Green's once smooth sidewalks were now dotted with new textures. Many neighbors voiced how modern and inclusive it looked. Some even boasted on social media that Maple Green was leading the way in suburban accessibility. Karen could barely stand the praise. Late one night, she walked the nearly completed path near the clubhouse, letting her fingers brush the raised Braille on a newly placed tile. It read Community Center West Entrance. The Braille bumps were subtle, but to Karen's mind, they were an eyesore. She paced in circles, as though searching for any excuse to lodge a last-minute complaint. But the board had already voted. The neighborhood had embraced the changes wholeheartedly. Seething, Karen considered sabotage again. But now, robust concrete pavers replaced the old plastic lumps. Even if she tried to break them, it would take hours of loud hammering, far riskier and more destructive, with a high chance of being caught. Already, rumors about her possible role in the initial vandalism floated around. She decided the risk was too high. Instead, Karen typed a lengthy email to the HOA board, lamenting the overshadowing of Maple Green's original design. She also tried claiming that Braille pavers were decreasing property values. But the real estate agent on the board pointed out that being inclusive could actually raise property values. The board politely thanked her for her input, but reaffirmed the plan was final. With the pavers in place, Patricia discovered a newfound sense of security. Each morning, she strolled around the block, cane tapping lightly on the Braille strips at each corner. On busier intersections, the pavers included a strip at the curb cut, letting her know precisely where the road began. Over time, she memorized the patterns. Squares with truncated domes meant stop or curb, while elongated ridges indicated alignment for crossing. Neighbors commented on how confidently Patricia moved now, rarely needing a sighted guide unless she was venturing somewhere unfamiliar. She no longer worried about accidentally stepping off an unseen edge. The fear that had haunted her post-vandalism began to dissipate. Other changes blossomed, too. A resident with low vision, who rarely walked outside due to uneven sidewalks, started venturing out more often, remarking that the pavers helped orient him. Parents with strollers appreciated the way the textured tiles provided traction at slopes. Even dog walkers found the Braille signage interesting. Some joked they were reading by paw as their dogs trotted across the lumps. Patricia took quiet pride in how her personal struggle had led to a community-wide improvement. She remained deeply grateful to Dylan, Sarah, Monica, Jerry, Belinda, and all who had pitched in. Each time she passed a tile reading Maple and Pine Saint, she thought about how an act of cruelty had, ironically, sparked a wave of compassion that made Maple Green better for everyone. Though no official suspect had been identified in the vandalism case, the local police still kept it open. Sporadic tips trickled in, someone claiming to have seen a hooded figure that night, others saying they heard a hammering sound. Nothing concrete tied the crime to a single individual, but Patricia couldn't help suspecting Karen. So did Dylan, Sarah, Monica, and many others. Yet suspicion without evidence wasn't enough for an arrest. Still, the rumor mill churned. Karen, feeling the neighborhood's side-eye, grew increasingly uncomfortable. She tried shifting blame, hinting that local teenagers might have done it for kicks. No one believed it. The kids in Maple Green were part of the group that helped Patricia, after all. One morning, a neighbor found a small tool near Patricia's fence line, a cheap chisel with flecks of dried adhesive. The neighbor turned it over to the police, suspecting it might be related to the vandalism. Investigators attempted to lift prints, but found only smudged partials. They questioned a few people known to have conflict with the Nolan household. Karen was apparently among them, though she denied any involvement. Patricia tried not to dwell on it, focusing instead on her daily routines and the neighborhood's positivity. But a quiet hope lingered in her mind that one day, the person responsible would be held accountable. As the new Braille pavers became fully operational, Maple Green Estates garnered attention from local news outlets. A reporter named Cecilia Adams visited to cover a feature story on accessibility innovations in small suburbs. She interviewed Patricia, Jerry, Dylan, and Sarah, capturing footage of Patricia confidently navigating the Braille-laden sidewalks. It's remarkable to see a homeowners association so proactively support accessible design, Cecilia noted, scribbling in her notepad. Jerry laughed. It wasn't always a breeze. But once the community rallied, the HOA recognized the importance. We're proud to be a model for others. Patricia, a bit camera-shy, nonetheless explained how the pavers had changed her life. I can walk to the store again. I can visit neighbors without fear. And these improvements help everyone, not just me. Cecilia also tried to interview Karen, who initially declined. Later, Karen offered a terse statement. I support the community's decision to enhance safety. I just hope we maintain Maple Green's aesthetic integrity. Her forced smile barely masked her disdain. That evening, the local station aired the segment, praising Maple Green's transformation as a triumph of empathy. Neighbors gathered around TVs, proud of the coverage. Patricia's phone lit up with supportive messages from friends and coworkers. She felt a mix of gratitude and lingering sadness that it had taken a painful event for all this to happen. Still, the outcome proved that cruelty could be overshadowed by community spirit. Late one afternoon, Karen was startled by an unexpected visitor. Jerry Lau knocked on her door, wearing an apologetic expression. "Evening, Miss Pennyman. May I come in for a moment?" Karen pursed her lips but stepped aside. She led Jerry to her immaculate living room, offering a seat but not exactly a warm welcome. "What brings you by, Mr. Lau?" Jerry folded his hands. "I won't beat around the bush. Many neighbors suspect you were behind the vandalism at Patricia Nolan's home. You opposed her markers. You had the most motive, and you never offered a real show of sympathy when it happened." He paused. "If you did it, I believe it's time to own up, at least privately, so this community can heal. You see how well Patricia's needs are being met now. You've lost that battle, but we can still preserve your dignity, maybe." Karen's face went pale. She bristled, scanning for denial. "That's quite an accusation," she said icily. "I can't believe you'd come here implying I'm a criminal. If you have proof, produce it. If not, you should leave." Jerry sighed. "I have no solid proof, just consistent suspicion. Karen, I've known you for years. I know you care about Maple Green deeply, but you lose perspective. I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. Even if you did it, we can handle it quietly. Maybe some restitution, an apology. Otherwise, this will hang over you forever." For a split second, Karen's composure wavered. A flicker of guilt crossed her eyes. But then her pride reasserted itself, and she snapped, "I refuse to discuss this further. Good night." She practically shoved him out the door. Jerry left, disappointed. He told no one about the conversation, respecting Karen's privacy. But in his heart, he felt convinced. She'd had a chance to deny it convincingly and hadn't. Still, no confession was forthcoming, and Karen seemed determined to stonewall. As Maple Green embraced its new Braille-laden pathways, most residents were thrilled with the changes. However, a small group, egged on by Karen, quietly grumbled about too many lumps on the sidewalks. They claimed it hurt their property values or made the neighborhood look industrial. Emboldened, Karen quietly circulated a petition demanding the HOA remove some Braille pavers to restore visual harmony. She tried to gather signatures, focusing on older residents who might be more conservative about changes. Karen pitched it as a partial rollback. We don't need them at every intersection, maybe just on Ms. Nolan's property. The rest is overkill. Over 2 weeks, she managed to secure about a dozen signatures, far short of a majority. Still, she pinned her hopes on presenting it at the next board meeting, hoping to sway the board back in her favor. When the board convened again, Karen presented her petition. She listed the signers, claiming they represented a sizable faction concerned about Maple Green's look. Belinda studied the petition, eyebrows raised. This is not a majority, Ms. Pennyman, and the board already approved the Braille pavers. They're installed with donated funds or matched by city grants in public areas. We can't remove them without cause. Karen's voice rose. Cause? The cause is that we are turning Maple Green into a bumpy maze. A dozen neighbors do not want lumps on every corner. She glared around the table, seeking support. Jerry shook his head. Our membership includes over 200 households, Ms. Pennyman. 12 signers is nowhere near enough to overturn the original vote. Belinda nodded. Besides, these pavers are a recognized accessibility feature. Removing them could expose us to liability issues or discrimination claims. We're done here. Karen flushed red. She stormed out of the meeting, petition in hand, humiliated once more. Even those who had signed seemed uncertain about going head-to-head with the entire neighborhood. Patricia, who overheard from the hall, felt both relief and sadness. Karen's persistent hostility weighed on everyone's morale. In the wake of Karen's failed petition, the sense of camaraderie only grew. Residents wanted to make it clear they stood with Patricia. They organized a modest access for all celebratory picnic in the community park, inviting people to explore the new Braille pavers around the clubhouse and indulge in potluck dishes. Patricia arrived with Monica, her cane lightly tapping the newly installed tactile edges near the park's entrance. Dozens of neighbors cheered, greeting her warmly. Tables overflowed with homemade cookies, grilled burgers, and fresh lemonade. Children ran around the playground, occasionally stopping to examine the Braille inscriptions on the walkway with curiosity. Dylan and Sarah surprised Patricia with a custom plaque, engraved with Braille and standard lettering. Maple Green, a neighborhood for everyone. They presented it to her with a flourish. We want to mount this near the clubhouse, Sarah said. A reminder of what can be accomplished when people come together. Tears sprang to Patricia's eyes. She touched the engraved Braille letters, smiling. I can't thank you all enough. Your kindness has transformed this place into somewhere I truly feel at home. A round of applause went up. The atmosphere crackled with warmth. While a handful of people remained aloof, likely Karen supporters, no one openly disrupted the event. Patricia, Monica, Dylan, Sarah, Jerry, Belinda, and the rest reveled in the sense that Maple Green, despite everything, had proven more good-hearted than not. That evening, well after the picnic ended, Patricia took a solitary walk. The fall air had grown crisp. Leaves on the maples blazed red and gold. She followed the Braille pavers from her street corner to the clubhouse, trailing her cane along the ridges. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wood smoke from a distant chimney. She paused on the clubhouse steps, remembering how terrified she'd been after the vandalism. Now, though, she felt a profound serenity. She could stand here alone, under the stars, because so many neighbors had stood by her, pushing for a permanent solution. She whispered a quiet thank you to the night sky, overwhelmed by gratitude. Yet she couldn't fully forget the person who had caused her so much pain. She wondered if that individual was watching now, feeling remorse. Patricia found herself wishing they would come forward and apologize. Maybe if they saw how these pavers helped her, they would realize the harm they'd done. But life seldom offered such neat resolutions. With a sigh, she brushed aside the memory of that night's hammer blows. She had her safety and freedom back. That would have to suffice. Meanwhile, Karen's life felt like it was unraveling. Her once undisputed authority in Maple Green had crumbled. Neighbors she used to intimidate with petty rule citations now barely listened to her. The board had rebuffed her multiple times. Some residents openly questioned if she was behind the vandalism, giving her cold stares or refusing to greet her on the street. At work, where she was a real estate broker, Karen found her sales struggling. Word spread that she'd clashed with her own neighborhood over accessibility features. Clients grew wary, not wanting to risk a property managed by someone with such a reputation. Karen, once so sure of her moral high ground, felt bitterness gnawing at her. She told herself it was unfair, that she had only tried to preserve Maple Green's visual appeal. One day, rummaging through old papers in her home office, she discovered the original invoice for Patricia's plastic dome markers, which she'd privately obtained months earlier when she first planned to cite Patricia. She stared at it, an uncomfortable swirl of guilt filling her. She remembered the night she chiseled them out, how she had to physically break each one. She recalled the adrenaline, the twisted satisfaction. Now it felt hollow, just a memory of a cruel act that isolated her from her own community. Still, she clung to the belief that Maple Green was better off without random lumps. Yet the Braille pavers had overshadowed her preference entirely. She crumpled the invoice in frustration, uncertain if she despised Patricia or herself more. On a brisk Saturday morning, Karen stepped outside to retrieve her mail, only to see two police officers walking up her driveway. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized one officer. He'd come around months ago investigating the vandalism. Karen forced a polite smile. "Good morning, officers. Can I help you?" One officer spoke gently but firmly. "Ms. Pennyman, we'd like to ask you a few more questions regarding the damage done to Ms. Nolan's driveway markers." He held up a transparent evidence bag containing a dusty hoodie. "We recovered this from the Greenbelt area behind Maple Green. We believe it might be linked to the perpetrator. We'd appreciate your cooperation." Karen's pulse thundered. She managed to control a nod. "Of course. Anything I can do." They stepped inside, and Karen led them to her living room. The questions began benignly. Where was she on the night of the incident? Had she ever owned a chisel? Did she recognize the hoodie? Karen answered calmly, claiming no knowledge. The officer then produced the tool with dried adhesive flecks, which had partial prints. "We suspect the prints could belong to a woman based on the hand size," he explained. "We have a warrant to collect your prints for comparison." Karen's composure cracked slightly. "A warrant? Surely that's unnecessary. I'm telling you, I had nothing to do with it." The officer remained polite but firm. "Ms. Pennyman, we prefer to do this cooperatively. You can come to the station for fingerprinting." Karen's mind whirled. If her partial print was on the chisel, she was done. She considered lying further, but the noose felt tight. She offered a trembling smile. "All right, officer, I'll come with you, no problem." Her face burned with shame. She knew her prints would match. The final revelation of her guilt loomed. Later that day, Karen sat in a small interrogation room at the local police station. A swirl of emotions consumed her: fear, anger, regret. Once the fingerprint test came back as a match, the evidence was undeniable. The officers gave her a choice. She could make a statement, possibly leading to a plea deal, or risk formal charges of property destruction and intimidation. Feeling cornered, Karen broke down. She confessed in a shaky voice that she had acted alone, fueled by anger at the board's decision and her obsession with uniform aesthetics. "I didn't mean for it to go so far," she whispered, tears staining her cheeks. "I thought they were just lumps. I never wanted to hurt Ms. Nolan." The officers recorded her statement. She was released later that night, pending charges. Maple Green's rumor mill exploded once the news leaked. Some neighbors were shocked. Others felt vindicated for suspecting her. Patricia heard the details from Dylan, who quietly relayed that Karen had confessed. Patricia's stomach churned. Though not surprised, hearing the truth still felt like a punch. At the next HOA board meeting, Belinda Caro announced Karen's resignation from her position as vice president and compliance chair, effective immediately. A hush of tension blanketed the room. Karen didn't attend, too humiliated to face the public. The board apologized to Patricia for the distress caused by an HOA leader's actions. Patricia, though relieved, felt conflicted. She wanted justice, but also recognized that Karen's twisted reasoning came from a deep-seated obsession with control. She had no desire for revenge. The legal system would handle Karen's case. Most likely, Karen would face a fine, potential restitution for damages, and possibly probation, but not jail time. For Patricia, that was enough. The main thing was ensuring Maple Green remained supportive of accessibility. Over the following weeks, Karen was rarely seen outside her home. Some neighbors speculated she might move away to escape the shame. Others guessed she'd lie low until the legal matters concluded. Either way, Maple Green turned a corner, one where the threat to Patricia's safety no longer lurked in the background. Despite Karen's confession and resignation, the Braille pavers remained and thrived. Over time, city officials recognized Maple Green as a model for inclusive design. Other subdivisions reached out, asking how they could replicate the paver system. The community's sense of pride soared. Patricia settled into a daily rhythm of independent living again, walking with her cane through winding streets, her confidence soaring with each tactile feedback from the pavers. She taught curious children how the Braille tiles spelled out street names, encouraging them to run their fingers over the raised dots. They giggled with fascination, forging a new generation that saw accessibility features as cool rather than odd. Meanwhile, the vibe of Maple Green shifted. The synergy sparked by the fundraiser and volunteer project lingered, manifesting in more neighborly gestures, helping the elderly weed their gardens, exchanging homemade meals, or painting welcome murals near the park. The pavers symbolized the triumph of empathy over petty conflict. As for Patricia, she often reflected on how Karen's sabotage had ironically ensured Maple Green gained an even more comprehensive accessibility network. Had Karen not incited such an extreme reaction, the Braille pavers might never have come to fruition. In a strange twist of fate, cruelty had inadvertently paved the way for a more inclusive future. Months later, on a mild spring morning, Patricia stood in front of the newly installed plaque by the clubhouse. Her fingertips traced the raised Braille text, Maple Green, a neighborhood for everyone. Monica and Sarah, flanking her sides, smiled as they read the standard lettering. "I guess this is the end of that dark chapter," Patricia murmured. Karen admitted she did it. The board is on board with accessibility, and the neighborhood has changed so much. Monica squeezed Patricia's arm. Yes, and all because the community refused to let hatred or ignorance win. Sarah nodded. "I heard Karen might be putting her house on the market. She's too embarrassed to stay, or so they say. But no one will forget the lessons learned here." Patricia exhaled, thinking about the complicated mixture of gratitude and sorrow she felt. She was grateful for the neighbors who had rallied around her, but sad that the conflict ever happened. "At least we turned something ugly into something beautiful," she said softly. "I've seen kids with visual impairment from other towns come here to explore sidewalks. It's amazing how quickly a single idea can spread." They began strolling along the walkway, the pavers gently guiding Patricia's cane. Maple trees rustled overhead, shimmering green in the morning light. Each step Patricia took reminded her of the resilience nestled in her heart, and in the hearts of those who had stood by her. Maple Green sidewalks might now feature lumps and Braille, but they also displayed the best of community spirit. Through adversity, the neighborhood had found its truest beauty, one that welcomed everyone.